I never thought I would have to fight for my family's land. But when I got a call at 6 a.m. from Mrs. Thompson, my grandfather's longtime neighbor, I knew something was wrong. "Alex, listen to me, you have to come back right now. They're building on your grandfather's land." My drowsiness vanished immediately. I tried to stay calm. Maybe Mrs. Thompson was wrong, or there was some misunderstanding. But her voice was shaking with anger. "You don't understand, Alex. They've put up signs, brought in heavy machinery, and started tearing up the fields. You have to come here right away." I grabbed some clothes, threw them in a suitcase, and jumped in the car. The trip from the city back to the countryside where my grandfather lived took 5 hours, but that day, it took me less than 4. A year ago, when my grandfather Joe Miller passed away, I became the legal heir to his 500-acre farm. I remembered the summers the first spent there as a child, the vast wheat fields, the rolling hills, and the winding stream that ran through the property. My grandfather always told me, "This land is more than just land, Alex. It's our legacy, and it will stay in our family forever." I'm not a farmer. I work in finance, and my life revolves around city skyscrapers, important meetings, and numbers on screens. But I've never thought about selling the farm. To me, it's part of my family's identity. Now, someone is building on it. As I turn onto the dirt road that leads to the farm, I feel my stomach drop. What had once been open fields and golden wheat was now a massive construction site. Bulldozers and trucks rumbled across the land, tearing up the soil my grandfather had farmed for decades. A giant billboard towered over the entrance. Sunrise Villas, 200 luxury homes. Prices starting at $750,000. I slammed on the brakes. This was my land. I stepped out, walking toward a woman in a tailored suit holding a clipboard. She looked up as I approached, her expression unreadable. "Excuse me, who's in charge here?" She glanced at me, her eyes sharp and calculating. "And you?" She flashed a practiced corporate smile, but I could see the coldness behind it. "Diane Reynolds, CEO of Sunrise Developments. We're developing Sunrise Villas here. If you're interested in buying a house, I can set up a meeting." I clenched my fists. This is my land. Diane didn't flinch. Instead, she gave me a patronizing smile. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. We legally bought this land last year. We have all the permits and approvals." I shook my head. "No way. My grandfather would never sell it." Diane tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "He probably didn't tell you. The sale was over a year ago." My mind was racing. My grandfather had never mentioned selling the land. He had been ill in his final months, but his mind was still sharp. Something was wrong. I moved closer. "I want to see the documents." Diane pulled a business card from her pocket. "You can contact our legal department. But I assure you, everything is fine." She turned away, dialing a number. I refused to stand by helplessly as the machine continued to tear apart my family's legacy. I needed to find out the truth. And I knew exactly where to start. My grandfather's old office. I stormed into my grandfather's farmhouse, the scent of old books and pipe tobacco still lingering in the air. Mrs. Thompson was waiting on the porch, watching me with concern. "Did they show you any paperwork?" I shook my head. "They said the land was sold over a year ago. But that doesn't make sense." Mrs. Thompson pursed her lips. "Your grandfather suspected something was wrong before he passed." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She sighed. 3 months before he died, he saw strangers on the property, surveying the land. They never explained why. He got suspicious and started looking through his old records. A day before he went to the hospital, he told me he had found something important, something that would protect the farm. But he never got the chance to tell me what it was. My stomach tightened. Then it has to be in his office. I searched through his office, flipping through files, checking every cabinet, every drawer. Nothing. Just as frustration was about to take over, I noticed a loose floorboard under the desk. I pried it open with a letter opener, revealing a metal box hidden beneath. Inside was a bundle of old documents wrapped in cloth. My hands trembled as I unfolded them. Among them were the original 1910 and 1978 land surveys, showing the property was actually 150 acres larger than what was recorded today. A certified copy of the land deed, proving the land had never been sold. A handwritten letter from my grandfather. I unfolded the letter, reading his familiar handwriting. Alex, if you're reading this, it means someone is trying to take what's ours. I never sold this land. If they claim I did, they're lying. Check the original survey. Compare it to the county records. The truth is in the boundaries. My breath hitched. He knew. And he had tried to stop them before it was too late. I rushed to the county records office, digging through public archives. What I found shocked me. In 1997, the land boundaries were adjusted, reducing my family's land by 150 acres. The change was signed by one person, Joe Miller. But when I compared it to my grandfather's actual signature, I knew it was a forgery. Even worse, the man who had approved the boundary change was James Harris, a former county official. And guess what? James Harris was now on the board of Sunrise Developments. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a land grab. This was a decades-old fraud. And I was about to expose it. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, Walter Franklin. Walter, I found something. They forged my grandfather's signature to steal the land. Walter was silent for a moment. Then he said, Alex, if that's true, this isn't just a property dispute. This is criminal fraud. I clenched my fists. So, what do we do next? Walter's voice was firm. First, we file for an emergency injunction to shut down the construction immediately. Then, we take this to court and expose everything. I exhaled slowly. Diane Reynolds and Sunrise Developments thought they had gotten away with this. They had no idea the trap they just walked into. I had no time to waste. If Sunrise Developments continued construction, reclaiming my grandfather's land would become even more difficult. I needed a plan. And I knew exactly where to start. I drove straight to Sunrise Developments headquarters, a sleek glass building in the heart of the city. I had no appointment, but I knew I couldn't be turned away immediately if I arrived during business hours. At the reception desk, I kept my voice steady. I have an appointment with Mr. Gerald Fisher. The receptionist checked her schedule and frowned. I don't see your name on the list today. I smiled. Tell him it's about a legal matter. My name is Alex Morgan. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, Gerald Fisher, Sunrise's chief financial officer, walked out. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and thin-rimmed glasses. When he saw me, his expression tightened. What do you want? I pulled out a folder from my bag and placed it on the desk. I think you'll want to see this. Gerald flipped through the documents. His face paled. I knew I had struck a nerve. Where did you get these? You already know, I said calmly. The entire Sunrise project is built on fraudulent land transfers. And according to your own financial records, over $10 million has been funneled into an LLC owned by Diane Reynolds. Gerald exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. I can't help you, Alex. I leaned in. You can, I said. If you cooperate, you can protect yourself. But if you stay silent, you're going down with them. A long pause. Then Gerald sighed. I have more documents. If I give them to you, I want immunity. I nodded. I'll talk to my lawyer. But we need to move fast. The next morning, my attorney Walter Franklin and I filed an emergency court order to halt all construction on the disputed land. We presented the evidence. The forged land documents from 1997. The original 1910 and 1978 surveys proving the land was mine. Gerald's financial records, exposing how Diane and her associates profited from fraud. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. Then he looked at Diane's attorneys. Construction is immediately suspended until further review. Relief washed over me. It wasn't a final victory yet, but it bought me time. The moment the court order was made public, Diane called me personally. "You think you can stop me?" Her voice was icy. "I don't think," I said. "I know. You have no idea who you're messing with. I have connections, people in City Hall, lawyers who could destroy you. You're just some nobody who walked into this town thinking you could change things." I smiled. "You'll be surprised." Diane took a deep breath. "Let me make you an offer. I'll pay you $3 million if you drop the case and walk away." I laughed. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about money." She hesitated. "Everything is about money." "Not this time." I hung up. I knew Diane wasn't going to give up easily. A week later, we went to court. Sunrise's lawyers presented documents claiming they legally owned the land. But then my lawyer, Walter, stood up and placed two maps side by side. "These are the original property lines from 1910 and 1978, he said. "And this is the altered version from 1997. The room grew silent as he continued. The change was approved by one official, James Harris, who now sits on the board of Sunrise Developments. "And the signature of Joe Miller on this document? It's a forgery." The judge turned to Diane. "Ms. Reynolds, do you have an explanation?" Diane kept her face neutral. "We followed all legal procedures." But Walter wasn't done. "Then perhaps you can explain this?" He held up Gerald's financial records, detailing the $10 million in fraudulent transactions. The tension in the room became palpable. Gerald himself took the stand. "I worked for Sunrise Developments for over 7 years, he said. "And I have proof that the company knowingly acquired stolen land." Within a month, the scandal exploded. Diane Reynolds was arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and document forgery. Sunrise Development stock plummeted, and their investors pulled out. City officials were forced to review all past real estate deals, uncovering more corruption. The court ruled in my favor. The 500 acres were officially returned to me. The Sunrise Villas project was permanently shut down. Diane Reynolds was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But the damage she had caused wasn't easily erased. Even though I had won, 200 families had already bought homes in Sunrise Villas. Instead of kicking them out, I did something different. I proposed giving legal ownership to the current residents, dismantling the corrupt HOA Diane had created and replacing it with a new Democratic Homeowners Association, transforming the remaining 300 acres into a protected nature reserve, just as my grandfather had wanted. At a town hall meeting, I presented the plan to over 300 people. At first, people were hesitant. Then Mrs. Thompson, my grandfather's old friend, stood up. "Joe Miller always wanted to protect this land. If Alex is honoring his wishes, I'm with him." One by one, hands went up. We had won the land back. Now, we were taking back the community, too. 1 year later, I stood on my grandfather's porch, watching families enjoy the new community garden. The land was safe. The homes were legally owned by the residents. The wetlands and forests were protected forever. Mrs. Thompson handed me a glass of lemonade. "Your grandfather would be proud." I smiled. "I think he still is." He had always told me, "Sometimes, the best trap isn't the one you set. It's the one your enemies walk into themselves." Diane Reynolds and Sunrise Developments had thought they could steal my land. Instead, they had given me something far more valuable, a stronger and better community. Because in the end, justice doesn't come from money or power. It comes from people who refuse to back down. And I never backed down.